It's Panthers at Dolphins on Sunday. Are you ready to shock the world? I'll give you my 3 keys how the Carolina Panthers can do that right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where on Wednesday throughout the rest of the regular season, I'll be answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions either at me or DM me to get into next week's edition of the weekly Wednesday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Happy Friday the 13th. I hope everyone has been watching Jason videos all day long. It's spooky season in full effect here in October. And if you're a Carolina Panthers fan, spooky season started back in September as the Carolina Panthers are 0-5, heading to face off against the 4-1 high-octane offense Miami Dolphins on Sunday afternoon down there in technically Miami Gardens, Florida, but down there in South Florida, as it will be a tall task for the Carolina Panthers if they're going to notch their first win of the season before heading into their Week 7 bye week, before coming out of the bye and having 2 home games and a chance to maybe turn some things around here. And we'll talk about it a little bit later here on the show. But right now, let me give you my 3 keys to victory, as I do every Friday heading into a game week. So next Friday, there will be no game. So there will be no 3 keys to victory. Maybe I can give you keys to how to win on the weekend off. But we'll get there when we cross that bridge next week. So 3 keys to victory here on the show. Key number 1. The Dolphins have a great offense. We are aware of that. You saw them put up 70 points on the Denver Broncos a couple weeks ago. Woof. The Carolina Panthers, I don't think are going to give up 70. If they give up 50, wouldn't shock me considering how banged up the defense is. But the real important key for the defense, it's not necessarily about, obviously it's about the scoreboard. But what the defense needs to be able to do is to get the Dolphins to 3rd down. The Dolphins, according to Frank Reich, and I'm going to believe these numbers are true. Frank Reich said at his press availability on Wednesday that the Dolphins are only averaging 9 third downs per game. 9 times a game, on average, teams are getting the Dolphins the 3rd down. That means that they are incredible on 1st and 2nd down and being able to get the yard to gain. The Carolina Panthers have an excellent 3rd down defense. For all of the injuries and the flaws that this defense has so far through the first 5.5 weeks of the season, they are 2nd in the NFL in 3rd down defense. Something that was a major issue when Matt Rule was here is no longer a problem for the Carolina Panthers, as they're only allowing their opponents to convert 29.8% of the time. So if you can get the Dolphins to 3rd down, so far this season, you've done a really good job at getting off the field. It will help if Dante Jackson, who was a full participant at practice on Wednesday, is out there starting on Sunday, which you would think, considering he went through practice on Wednesday, recording this before I saw the injury report on Thursday, he should be good to go. That helps you. CJ Henderson, of course, as we know, former first-round pick, top 10 pick. He's made some strides this season. He's definitely looked better than he's looked in the past 2 years. Those 2 guys out there, that gives you a chance, as now you have DiCaprio Bootle, who's been elevated, not even elevated. He's been signed to the 53-man roster. You have him, Deshaun Jameson. You have more of a chance than you would have had last week when Dante Jackson was not out there against the Lions. You had to play a ton of zone coverage. We talked about that yesterday with Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins. If they do that against Mike McDaniel, just like we saw with Ben Johnson last week, and a better quarterback and better offensive weapons, they're going to get shredded. they might get shredded anyways, but they cannot play zone defense and allow the Dolphins to just dink and dunk and get down the field. Like, that's what you would want them to do, is have to drive down the field slow, methodically, but get the third down. If you can get the third down, you obviously can get off the field, and you've done a really good job of doing that so far this season against some pretty good offenses. Like, Detroit had to punt a lot in the second half on Sunday. You saw Seattle really struggle in the first half. The Panthers have had a solid red zone defense as well in the first half of games. So get the Dolphins a third down, and you might have a chance in this football game. Number two, obviously, you got to limit explosive plays. I always have pretty much the same keys when you go into these games. And the same keys are really protect the quarterback, get after the quarterback, don't turn the football over. Limit explosive plays. You could probably throw that one in there as a fourth no-brainer key to have each and every week, but especially against the Dolphins, an offense that has been absolutely disgusting through 5 weeks of the season, y'all. Tua leads the NFL in passing yards. Tyreek Hill leads the NFL in receiving yards. They're the number one total offense with 513.6 yards per play. That is over 100 yards per game than the next team, which is the Philadelphia Eagles, who played for a Super Bowl last year. That's incredible what the Dolphins are doing right now. Number one rushing offense at 185.8 yards per game. Number one passing offense at 327.8 yards per game. Now, for the Panthers, defensively, they're fifth against the pass. And that probably ties into how good they are on third down. If you're good against the pass, you should be able to get off the field on third down, seeing as if you're able to get your team opponents into long down and distances, which the Panthers have been able to do a lot this season. But the problem for the Panthers is they are not good at all against the run. They've given up 130 yards plus in every single game this season. They are 26 right now against the run, allowing 140.8 yards per game. It gets worse and worse each week, and it would not be a surprise at all if they give up 200 yards rushing plus on Sunday afternoon against Miami Dolphins. So it's not just explosive plays on the ground or through the air. It's both. Okay. So you can't give them up through the air. You can't give them up through on the ground. Through the air, I'm not as concerned about it, considering Dante should be back in a way that they've not really given that many up this season. But on the ground, you've seen the Panthers give up, runs of like 5 or 7 or 10 yards. Nothing crazy. You saw 42 last week with David Montgomery, but it hasn't really been that explosive. It's just been consistent. 5 yards here, 6 yards here, here's 7 yards. All right, going to break off for 13 now. It hasn't been like the 50, 30, 20 plus yard runs that we've seen in previous years for the Carolina Panthers. This year, though, I think this week that could happen if the Carolina Panthers are not able to figure out what they want to do. Like Ejiro Evero comes from that Vic Fangio tree. And Frank Reich talked about it on Wednesday, that a Vic Fangio defense wants you to have to go down the field methodically. That's what the Carolina Panthers should also want. So they can get the Dolphins a third down and they can hold up and not allow those explosive plays. Then defensively, they can have a chance and really get the third down too. Going back to that previous key, that gives Brian Burns an opportunity to tee off. It gives Frankie Louvu in this pass rush an opportunity to get after Tua, to potentially make some mistakes. Number 3, and this is a big old duh, but they got to keep up offensively. The Carolina Panthers are only averaging 18.2 points per game while allowing 28.8. That's obviously bad. The Dolphins, as we know, have the number one offense in the league. They're going to score points. That is just something that's going to happen. In today's football, whether it's in the NFL or in college or in high school, the game is suited for offenses to be able to do whatever the hell they want. Defense, you can't touch them. There's ridiculous pass interferences. There's ridiculous sack or roughing the passers and all those calls. We see it week in and week out in the NFL. So with the game, I guess helping off. I can't think of the word, but with the game catered to offenses, I don't think that's what I was actually trying to say. But either way, the game is better suited for offenses nowadays because of the rules. The Panthers have to be able to score points in this game. Like, this is not going to be a game you can win 17-13. It's not going to be a knockout, drag-out slugfest. It's going to have to be a game where you're going to have to be in a track meet. You're going to have to try and limit the explosive plays as much as you can, try to get the Dolphins third down as much as you can. But Bryce Young and this offense, they have to go out there and they need to perform. What we saw last week in the second half, those 2 touchdown drives in the last 2 drives, that's what they have to do. If they can get down the field on 7 plays, 14 plays, however many plays it takes, they can get down the field, hit on some third downs. That gives them a chance to obviously get on the board, and that's the only way they keep with the Dolphins. It's not going to be a defensive slugfest. It's, like I said, it's going to be a game where the Carolina Panthers have to put up at least like 28, 30 points if they want to win this game on Sunday. Are they capable of that? Frank Reich keeps telling us that they're not that far away. All right, Frank, this is the time to see it. This is the game of any games all season long where you better be able to score 28, 30 points if you want to have any shot at winning on Sunday afternoon down there in Miami. Well, the Carolina Panthers, they have been banged up through the first 5 weeks of the season, and they head into week 6 with yet another injury after Chandler Zavala went out with that neck injury last week. We'll look at the injury report, and there's some good news for the Carolina Panthers once they get out of the bye. How could that impact their season moving forward? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to the medication in an emergency, you actually have it. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting those life-saving antibiotics of Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using my code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. The Carolina Panthers have been severely banged up here in the first 5 weeks of the season. That has played a large role in the Panthers' 0-5 start. Taking a look at the injury report and also discussing some of the key injuries and guys who potentially could be coming back soon. Just looking at it right now, Miles Sanders did not practice on Wednesday or Thursday. He has a shoulder injury. He has been on the injury report the last 3 weeks. The previous 2 weeks was because of a groin. That was the same groin injury, I would assume, that kept him out during the preseason and has probably played a major role in why Miles Sanders only has 190 yards rushing so far this season. One of the high-priced free agents for the Carolina Panthers and the highest-paid running back this past free agency. He has definitely been a disappointment for the Carolina Panthers. So right now he's dealing with shoulder, and if he did not practice on Wednesday, did not practice on Thursday, I would expect that he's probably not going to play in the game on Sunday. Xavier Woods also did not practice. The Panthers haven't said much about Woods other than like it was, significant. They didn't put him on IR, even though he's not going to play this week. He didn't play last week, didn't play the week prior. So maybe they're going to get him after the bye. So that's probably why they didn't want to put him on IR. I'm not quite sure, but he did not practice again on Wednesday and Thursday with that hamstring. Chandler Zavala, no surprise, did not practice with the neck on Wednesday or Thursday. So those 3 players should definitely be out. Taylor Moton listed with an injury of knee/rest, was limited on Wednesday, did not practice on Thursday. I'm going to guess that he's just, resting this time. And then everyone else, Calvin Throckmorton, limited participant on Wednesday and Thursday with a calf. Austin Corbett, limited participant on Wednesday and Thursday with a knee. And Stephon Sullivan was limited with a hip on Wednesday and a full participant on Thursday. So Stephon Sullivan, who was on IR, he is, of course, now working his way back off of IR. He appears to maybe be ready to go come Sunday afternoon. It'll be interesting to see how they utilize him. The tight end usage has been a question that a lot of fans have had. And Thomas Brown talked about, hey, they're versatile and yada, yada, yada. But come on, everyone knows that the best tight end in that room is Hayden Hurst. That's the guy that the Carolina Panthers gave a 3-year, $21 million deal to. And for whatever reason, he has not appeared to be a massive part of the game plan over the last couple of weeks. And that is a concern for fans. So Stephon Sullivan comes back. That's great. But Hayden Hurst needs to be far more involved, especially on Sunday against the Dolphins if the Panthers want to win that game and win moving forward. Dante Jackson, full participant on Wednesday and on Thursday with that shoulder, so he is good to go. Brian Burns limited with an ankle on Wednesday, did not practice on Thursday. So some concern there that Brian Burns may be out. It doesn't say rest either. So we'll see how serious that is with Brian Burns, but did not practice on Thursday. We'll see whether he will be good to go. And then Derek Brown limited with a knee/ankle on Wednesday, and he also did not practice on Thursday. So 2 of those to monitor, as that is a little concerning. Obviously, your top two defensive players, both of those guys not practicing on Thursday, and it's not designated as a rest, knee/ankle for Derek Brown. Then everyone else, Giovanni Ricci did not practice with a shoulder on Thursday. Kamu Grier-Hill limited with a back, and then Von Bell was limited with a quad injury. So Brian Burns and Derek Brown, don't know whether to be concerned about that. The fact they didn't practice is interesting, but we'll see if they practice on Friday through their walkthrough. If they do, then everything should be good to go for the two of them heading down to Miami. But they have not been listed as questionable or any of that. So probably going to be good to go, but do not expect to see Miles Sanders, Xavier Woods, or Chandler Zavala, as those three did not practice any of the days so far this week. But there was some good news, though, as far as the injuries go for the Carolina Panthers. Austin Corbett, he, as I mentioned, limited on Wednesday and on Thursday. He's working his way back to being available, hopefully after the bye. That's what he said. He wanted to get through the bye week first. When he was taken off a pup last week and had the 21 days, I looked at the calendar, and it made sense that it would be after the bye. Like day 21 would be that Wednesday practice where the Carolina Panthers are going to be preparing for the Houston Texans. That would be when he would need to be activated. So I'm guessing that obviously didn't play last week, not going to play this week, get the bye week. That's more time to get back in shape. Then there's no choice but for him to be ready, because if he's not, they would have to then have him be out for the rest of the season. And at 0-6, there could be an argument to be made that that makes sense for the Panthers to do that. Put Cade Mays in there at right guard instead of Calvin Throckmorton, have Chandler Zavala at left guard, and just develop those guys the rest of the season. Because if you really think about it, it's not going to be a team that's going to be a playoff team this year. Maybe they have a miracle turnaround, but that would be the first time in NFL history a team started off 0-5 or even 0-6 and gone to the playoffs. I don't see that happening. And the primary focus for the organization, and really if you're a fan, should be on the development of Bryce Young. So why not try and develop some other guys in the meantime? But I don't think that's going to be what the Carolina Panthers decide to do. And getting Austin Corbett out there would give them a fighting chance to potentially turn this thing around. Now, they're pretty far in the hole. And I don't think they're going to turn it around to the point where, oh, they're back in contention for the playoffs. And here's a real thing, too, if you think about the playoffs, if we can even have this conversation, if we should even have the conversation, rather, they have lost 2 divisional games, as we know. They have lost to the Vikings, to the Lions, and to the Seahawks. They're 0-5 in the NFC. Like, those are the crucial tiebreakers, is what your conference record is. Obviously, the head-to-head's important, but when you think about the wild card, which is what the Carolina Panthers would, I mean, they'd probably still be hoping for the division, as they're, I think, 2.5 back of Tampa Bay right now. That would be the way to get to the playoffs. But if you think even about wild card, what really puts them in a massive bind is being 0-5 and having played all those conference opponents and lost to them, aside from the teams in their division with Atlanta and New Orleans in the first 2 weeks of the season. But either way, after the bye, Austin Corbett has to be activated. And as I told you last week, that's what I expected. And it's a good thing. It can help stabilize the offensive line. The Panthers back in 2021, when they went 5-12, started 13 of 17 different combinations. And I understand that year when you had John Miller, you had Matt Paradis who got injured, you had Pat Elflein, you had Michael Jordan in there, you had Dennis Daly. That was a very bad interior offensive line group. You saw it dating back to the preseason. Like, they were bad. And even if they had stayed healthy, that wasn't going to be one of the top half offensive lines in the NFL. But when you have that many different combinations, you have no chance at winning at all in the NFL. And then you combine that with your quarterback getting hurt and also not being very good, Christian McCaffrey being hurt, and you got what you got in 2021, a complete disaster after an inspiring 3-0 start by the Carolina Panthers that season. You have to have a healthy O-line. You have to be able to win up front. If you can't win up front, you cannot win in the NFL, or really in any level of football, but especially at the NFL level. And right now, the Carolina Panthers, they are sitting in a position where they are going to be on their 4th different starting combination through 6 games. It's hard to win games that way, y'all, like I just mentioned. And it's no coincidence that so far they've had 3 in the first 5 games that they're 0-5. And you think about Brady Christensen being out for the rest of the season. Corbett hasn't played yet. That's what happens when you have to throw Cade Mays out there. You got to throw Calvin Throckmorton, a rookie, and Chandler Zavala. This is a result of not having a healthy offensive line. If they are healthy going into the season and would have stayed healthy, I don't think this is an 0-5 football team. I don't see that much pressure coming up the middle. I think that they are able to be maybe 2-3 or 3-2 at this point. I don't think they're 0-5 with the healthy offensive line, a unit that I touted as the best on the team. And of course, that has not been the case. There's been other reasons why this unit has struggled aside from injuries. But the number one issue is a lack of continuity and, of course, the injuries that they've suffered. So it can help stabilize the offensive line by getting Austin Corbett back. I don't expect to see the same player that we saw last year when he was a second-rated offensive lineman, according to Pro Football Focus for the Panthers a year ago. I don't expect to see that player, but I think he will be better than what they've seen so far. And talk about development, too. I know Chandler's Wall is going to miss this week. Not quite sure when he's going to come back. But when he does, it would make more sense for the Panthers, honestly, thinking just development-wise, to keep him there at left guard, even though he struggled. It's possible there could be a future for him there. I don't know, but it makes more sense to put him there than Calvin Throckmorton. Now, if you're just trying to just flat out win games, and Throckmorton probably gives you the best chance to win games, but if you're thinking ahead long-term and knowing that, okay, we got to build some depth on the O-line. We lost Christensen. We lost Corbett. And this is what it's resulted in. Getting Chandler Zavala some meaningful reps the rest of the way would make some sense from a development standpoint for the Carolina Panthers. Then J.C. Horn, according to Frank Reich, he and Marquise Haynes will both be evaluated following the bye. Interesting thing about Haynes is, like, it feels like he's been forgotten so far this season. The Panthers have 14 sacks on the season. It took until week 9 at Cincinnati for them to reach that total a year ago. They've done it through 5 weeks, and they've been pretty good at getting after the passer. Now, sacks is important, but really pressure over sacks, and they've gotten plenty of pressure on quarterbacks this season. 4 of those sacks have come from Brian Burns, 2.5 from Frankie Louvo and Etor Gross-Matos, only a half a sack from Justin Houston. So while you would think that if Justin Houston only had a half a sack by this point in the season, the Panthers would have been really struggling to get after the passer. That has not been the case, as Frankie Louvo's picked up where he left off last year, and Etor Gross-Matos has really stepped up, taking some of those snaps that would have been there for Marquise Haynes. And when Haynes comes back from that back injury, which we don't know when that's going to be and what he's going to look like, because that has been something that's really bothered him dating back to the end of July, early August. So we'll be curious to see if he's able to come back healthy, be explosive, and if he can help out that pass rush for the Panthers in the second half of the season. But he should be evaluated during the bye, and then we'll see whether he and Horn and some of these other guys can come back. But Austin Corbett, at the very least, should be back come after the bye, as far as the guys that are on IR that we're discussing now. Like, he, of the 3, should definitely be back, and will have to be back once Carolina Panthers come back. Preparing for the Houston Texans after the bye week. The Carolina Panthers are 13.5-point underdogs, so they're likely to start off 0-6. What should fans be looking out for the rest of the season if that is the case? Let's talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. Prize Picks is the most fun you'll have, winning up to 25 times your money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. Test your skills on Prize Picks this football season. It's the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Prize Picks is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. According to our friends over at FanDuel, the Carolina Panthers are 13.5 underdogs as they go into the game against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday afternoon. Through 5 weeks, the Panthers are 0-5, and they are also 0-5 against the spread. Let's just be honest. Let's keep it a buck. We all know what's going to happen. The Panthers are not going to win the game on Sunday, and they are unlikely to cover that spread, as big as it is. Like, that's as big as you're going to see it in the NFL. That's something that you're used to seeing on Saturdays, but on Sundays, it is not often that you see a near 2-touchdown point spread in a game. So, yeah, the Panthers are going to go 0-6, and that is obviously concerning. We had a discussion earlier this week about, could Frank Reich be a one-and-done head coach? I don't think that will be what turns out to happen here in Carolina. I think they're going to be able to win some games in the second half of the season. I believe that we're going to see some progress from Bryce, and it'll be enough for David Tepper to keep him around and for the Carolina Panthers to look to the offseason and try and fix the numerous roster holes that they have heading into 2024. So I do think Frank Reich will be the head coach next year. But of course, if things completely crater and continue down the path that they are currently on, then yes, the discussion has to be had whether Frank Reich should return as a Carolina Panthers head coach. They go 3-14, 2-15. I just don't really see how you bring him back in that situation with the experience that he has, the coaching staff has. And I understand that the roster is not nearly as talented as it needs to be in order for the Carolina Panthers to compete at a high level here in the NFL. And that goes back to Scott Fitterer in the front office. I wonder this. I was thinking about this earlier today because there are obviously a lot of fans want Scott Fitterer gone. Every Wednesday, someone's asking me, oh, hey, when is Scott Fitterer going to get fired? You need to fire him. I saw Vashti Hurt was out there at practice on Wednesday, and she had a video of one-on-one reps with DJ Johnson, the third-round pick, who the Panthers traded up for. They used 2 of the McCaffrey picks to go get DJ Johnson. And just a quick aside, for those of you who are like, oh, let's trade Brian Burns. Let's trade this player and that player for picks. You traded Christian McCaffrey, and a lot of y'all, I know you want to do the revisionist history thing, be like, oh, I never wanted Christian leave. Bull. Plenty of y'all out there didn't want Christian here because you got upset when he got injured. Remember, you wanted him gone. You wanted to trade for picks. The picks ended up being one of them they used as leverage to get Bryce Young, and 2 of them they used so they could get DJ Johnson, who got a jersey week 1, got a jersey last week, but has not played a single snap. Ended in one-on-ones against David Sharp and against, I think, Joe Dorenzo. Looked awful. No burst. 25-year-old project. So just remember that the next time you're like, oh, let's trade this player for picks, and then see what those picks end up becoming. Now, if you get a new GM, do the picks become better? That's a conversation, of course, that we can have. And that's probably the conversation that you're a little bit more comfortable having because you don't have to admit that, oh, maybe you were wrong to be like, let's get rid of a good player and then get a really bad player. Anywho, yeah, TJ Johnson, not great. So just Scott Fitterer, there's some questions there. Now, I saw that it was, oh, God, what was his name? From Underdog Fantasy, Josh something. You know, I had him on the show. I can't remember his name, but you'll know what I'm talking about. He had came out and he said, oh, well, that was a Jero Vero who really liked DJ Johnson. And that's one of the things where I wonder how much of these decisions the last couple of years have been Scott Fitterer and how much of them were like Matt Rule. When Fitterer came in 2021, was it Matt Rule had all the control and all the power? Because it feels like Sam Darnold was Matt Rule. It was Phil Snow who watched the Jets tape. And he's like, oh, hey, man, this quarterback, got to go get him. And I think it was then Matt Rule being like, oh, let's go get Sam. And you think about Baker Mayfield. It was Matt Rule who was pounding the table for Baker Mayfield. So are you going to put that on Scott Fitterer? Because he facilitated the deals. But if the head coach who has the power is like, hey, get this done, I don't know. And I'm not trying to sit here and necessarily defend Scott Fitterer and say that he should not be on the hot seat or have any criticism. I still believe that he's tied with Frank Reich. I think having some stability there would make a lot of sense. And yeah, I think they've missed, and we can spend part of next week talking about the misses that they've had so far in free agency and what they need to do moving ahead of next season or going to next season as far as the offseason goes. But I just wonder, and you have to remember this too. If you get rid of Scott Fitterer, that means you're going to get rid of a lot of the area scouts who are going to lose their job. It's not just Scott Fitterer. The area scouts are going to lose their job. And I talk about this with Matt Rule. You want to fire Matt Rule? That's by all means. Hey, he needed to go. But understand, more people lose their jobs than just the head coach in that situation. So if you fire Scott Fitterer, he's gone. Does then Dan Morgan, Samir Sulman want to be the general manager and say they don't get that job? Do they then leave? Maybe that's a good thing. But you're going to lose the scouts. You can lose Fitterer, potentially lose Sulman, potentially lose Dan Morgan, who worked a long time with Scott Fitterer there in Seattle. And a big reason why he's here is because of Scott Fitterer, obviously his connection to the area, having played for the team and lived here. But that has to be a large part of why he's here as well in Carolina. So just these are things to consider when you want to get trigger happy and be like, hey, fire this guy. You have to also just think about how many of the decisions were actually on him. Was it really the DC who wanted that player? Was it that former head coach who wanted that player? Of course, he's a general manager. And you think about heading into the bye at 0-6 potentially and likely, what needs to change? Like changes have to be made. Well, I think the most obvious change is, okay, Frank Reich offense, it's not working. You're trying to simplify things for Bryce. Thomas Brown calls the plays now because that 0-6, the offense is bad. And we've already seen David Tepper in the past. Tell Ron Rivera, I like that you're the one who's going to call the plays defensively. In 2019, we saw how that worked out. Ron Rivera got fired. For Frank Reich, all right, pass the buck over to the OC. And I also thought about this too. If Thomas Brown was the OC right now, when the Panthers offense looked like this, y'all would want his ass fired. And instead, he's not calling plays, and everyone's like, "Oh, got to get him to call plays." So it's just interesting how things could be different had he been the one calling plays, even though he is a large contributor to what the offense looks like week in and week out, even if he's not the primary play caller on those down and down out bases for the Carolina Panthers. Just another thought I had as just a bunch of thoughts are coming to my head as the Panthers are about to head to Miami and lose and be 0-6 heading into the bye week. So just some things to think about. But yeah, 0-6. You would think that first thing would happen is that Frank Reich would have to give up play calling. The next thing that would happen, I would think, would probably be Scott Fitter having to, wear all the sins of the past and be fired. Will that happen? We'll see. But the Carolina Panthers, they got to figure it out. I mean, I think Bryce Young can develop moving forward. As again, I mentioned, there's been some talk about simplifying the offense for him. That is really the key. The rest of the way is the development of Bryce Young, and if they can simplify things and not ask him to have to do so many checks. You see the play call getting out late, and just seeing how getting in late, and just seeing all the communication, how long it's taking for them to snap the football and having to use timeouts, almost having delay of games, all that. Does that then go away starting on Sunday if things are simplified for Bryce, who still is great at processing, but he's still a rookie, and they're probably, and it seems committedly, have put a little bit too much on his plate so far. So that's something to look forward at to the next to really focus on moving forward is the development of Bryce Young and seeing how he's able to, manage the offense if they're really simplifying things for him. And, Frank Reich had said when you're 0-5, the answer is to do less. Well, really, we need you to do more. Just thinking about it, they go 0-6 to get up to come out of the bye. Got Houston at home, Indy at home, 2 winnable games. Not going to see Anthony Richardson. You will see C.J. Stroud. 2 winnable games. Chicago's a winnable game. It's not crazy to think that this team ends up going 3-0 in that period, being 3-6. Then who knows? If they're feeling good about that themselves, they get Dallas come here. We've seen Dak Prescott turn the football over. It's not crazy to think that maybe they beat the Cowboys, and then you got Tennessee on the road, then at Tampa, at New Orleans. Like that's the next tough stretch is those 3 straight road games. But Tennessee is a winnable game as well. I don't think they're going to go 5-0 out of the bye and be 5-6 once they get down to Tampa. But I do think they can win 3 or 4 games coming out of it. And we can start to see the football team that we thought we were going to see once the season started off. So that's just some things to consider as Carolina Panthers head to Miami this weekend. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, make sure to subscribe or follow the show for free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council, where I will be back with you next Wednesday for the weekly Wednesday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. Either at me or DM me to get those questions into me now. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding. And I'll be back with you here on Sunday afternoon live on YouTube as we break down the Carolina Panthers loss against the Miami Dolphins.